And we're
Hey,
live.
everybody. Well, we're live. Me and Grassia are here tonight. And tonight we got a very, very special and exciting guest star. Tonight we have Tom Ruegger with us tonight. So as we've been advertising, and for those of you who know anything about some animation from really like our childhoods, I mean, Tom Ruegger was behind some of the great shows like variations of Scooby Doo. Grazia's got his Animaniacs show on, Tiny Toon Adventures, Hysteria, Batman the Animated Series, like that renaissance that happens. We'll talk more about that of Warner Brothers in the 90s. But again, a bunch of Filmation shows, Hanna Barbera shows, like one of the giants in the cartoon industry. So Tom Ruegger will be with us tonight. So
let's bring him in
to the show.
Hello.
Hey guys.
Hi, Tom.
And
thank you for joining us.
It's good to be here.
Thank you. So the way this works is we're just going to basically have a conversation, ask questions. Our audience will be able to ask questions, and we'll ask you what they ask you.
Good.
So I guess let's talk a little bit, I guess, about your career. Do you want to tell us a little bit about some of the stuff you've done that maybe Mike didn't even mention?
There's a lot.
It is.
He covered a lot of it. Pinky and the Brain is on the list as well. Something called Rovers.
Wow.
I did a lot of dogs in my day. At Hanna Barbera, I certainly did plenty of dogs with Scooby and Pound Puppies and different things like that. And Road Rovers was the one dog show I did at Warner's.
Those were the guys that were like in the it was like a snow thing, right? Wasn't it?
They did have a really good episode in the snow, but they were let's see, they had a song, barking, scratching, tushish. I don't know. They had this really energized main title that I'm blanking on right now.
Yeah, I remember something like Hunter is a hero hound, leader of the pack, right?
Collins comes from London town, watch her feet attack.
Yeah.
Exiles from Siberia with a stupid frozen sight. I don't know.
It was going. Blitz, I think, was next, right? Blitzen or Blitz, was it? I don't remember.
Blitz, and there was a dog that was dressed up like Hannibal Lecter.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, it was a fun. And then the 90s, from Animaniacs, Freakazoid, Road Rovers, like all those came out, shortly around that.
Yeah,
that
Tiny
time.
Toons was the start at Warner Brothers. My start was with Tiny Toons. Then we did Batman the Animated Series. Then came Animaniacs and Pinky and the Brain, Road Rovers, Hysteria.
Yeah.
That was. I mean, I don't know if that was. I mean, there was certainly a golden age of Warner Brothers, but I think like Grassia and I and a lot of the people watching, that was our golden age. I mean, there were a lot of great characters and great.
Well, now your ages are you're in your 30s?
40s. I'm 44.
So I was catching you right before you were going to stop watching. I think I caught you at the end, right?
We never stopped.
Good. I'm glad.
I'll be honest. I still watch Animaniacs. I have the DVDs. I have the Hulu. I watch it on Hulu. I rewatch Freakazoid on the DVDs. I have
Freakazoid
on Hulu.
Yeah,
I love those.
We didn't mention the beautiful Super Teen Extraordinaire.
Yeah.
I liked writing all the songs. That was one of my favorite parts. Was the little main titles I wrote, starting with Pound Puppies and then Pup Named Scooby Doo, and then all the Warner shows.
I gotta say, A Pup Named Scooby Doo is one of my favorite theme songs.
It's so good. John Debney brought this great group of women and the lead male singer together for all those songs on A Pup Named Scooby Doo.
That great 50s feel.
Yeah, and that main title was originally conceived in 3D. On one of the DVDs for the first season of Pup Named Scooby Doo, there's a black and white version of the 3D version, which it's a shame that we didn't get to bring it to fruition, but and it was going, we were making it, and then Bill Hanna found out how much it was going to cost, and he said, that's not happening. Yeah.
Let me just ask you a quick Pup Named Scooby Doo question. I know, and we're going to talk more about Pup Named Scooby.
Sure.
One thing I was always wondering, was there ever a possibility, like I know they had the classic gang, did they ever think, I liked Scooby Doo. Was he ever a possibility to have shown up in the show? Did they ever mention Scooby Doo?
Oh, Scooby Doo, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, we kind of left a lot of those additional characters behind because we would have had to watch all the shows to make sure that we were consistent with their backstory. So if Scooby Doo had been, if they met in an episode in the future, we couldn't like bring them in as when they're kids. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so
we would have never been in that world, obviously.
We were trying to create our own little younger universe. So yeah. Now
And I mean,
that show I think really so much fun. And the one thing I regret is that my initial conception was that Velma would only say the word Jinkies. That was it. No other words. She would just say Jinkies, and everyone would then fill in all the blanks. And Velma said Jinkies. That must mean this and that and the other thing. And she'd go, oh, that's right. Which I think would have been great because she had that wonderful little scissor step.
Yeah.
Anyway, some of the writers insisted that she speak more.
Now let me just going back to your early days when you started.
Hold on, Mike, you got a bit of an echo.
Is there an echo?
Yeah. Or at least I'm hearing it.
Uh-oh.
Okay. Is it me?
I don't know.
No. Well, like I said, I feel I hear sometimes in my earphones.
No worry. What was interesting, we had Scott Shaw on a few weeks ago. And you share something very similar with him is when he started out watching these cartoons, he was a big Flintstones fan. Apparently you were also a huge fan, and that's where you learned to draw a lot of these characters too.
Yes, you've done research. Hey, none of that. My parents, I was watching the Flintstones one night, and Huckleberry Hound and Yogi before the Flintstones. I would be watching them, and I'd have my drawing pad in front of me with crayons, and I would be watching it, looking up at, Huck and Yogi, and then the Flintstones. And I remember one week the TV Guide had the Flintstones on the cover, and that was like, I still have that TV Guide cover. It is so crumbly, but it also has crayon marks on it. But I didn't trace; I did freehand, and my parents said, "Oh my gosh, that's great!" And they gave me more paper and crayons. And I've gone back and looked at some of those drawings, and they're pretty terrible. but you got me started.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Well, the other thing, because then I guess when you went to college and stuff, and I knew this character, I know you created him in college, but he showed up in 13 Ghosts of Scooby Doo. Tell us a little bit more about Platypus Duck.
Well, Platypus Duck was this. It's a platypus character, and I just flopped the duck around. And so he's, and you can probably see something of him online. I'm going to put a good copy of the premiere Platypus Duck online in the next week or so. So I'll make you watch that. It was a college project. There was like a $2,000 grant being offered, and it was a contest. So different people proposed different films to win this $2,000 grant. So I did like a little storyboard of the premiere of Platypus Duck, and it was basically the history of the world seen through nothing like a little ambition, seen through the eyes of a duck-billed platypus as he starts as like a little single cell amoeba, and then he comes out of he evolves out of that, and like from a worm into like a creature that comes out on land and goes back in the water. And so anyway, it was the premiere of Platypus Duck, and I won this grant from the Arthur and Lily Mayer Foundation. They also used to give grants to the USC. And so I then I ruined the next 2 years of my entire college existence by just drawing all the time and doing animation. I was like locked away in a closet. I didn't see anyone. And they said, "Wait, what happened to him?" And so made this film, and it was 11 minutes long. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Should have been 2 minutes long. It would have been pretty good. But 11 minutes long, I was kind of pushing it. So after college, I put the reel under my arm, and I drove out to LA, and I went around trying to get a job using that film, unaware that in Hollywood, all the films and projectors are 35 millimeter, not 16. So no one could see it.
Now, how close was the iteration outside of the modified Grape Ape theme that we saw on 13 Ghosts of Scooby Doo to your original version? And the
original version has beautiful music by a good friend Parker McDonald, who's a great songwriter, and the Grape Ape theme and his music do not coincide. So it was the music was very haunting and beautiful back in our college days. And the Grape Ape theme I thought was a great theme. And we got Howie Morris, who did the voice of Platypus Duck in the Scooby episode. And boy, do I have a story about Howie Morris when you have time.
Please share.
Well, Howie Morris, great voice actor, and of course, in that cartoon, the Duck-billed Platypus is painted wrong on the Hanna Barbera version. They just didn't want to go to the extra color lines and everything, so that's one disappointment. But Howie Morris did a lot of work for us on all sorts of things. He did the Good, the Bad, and the Huckleberry, and so.
And people know him from Andy Griffith's show because that's where he was Ernest T.
But I went up to Howie one day. I said, I have to tell you a story, Howie. My parents, way back when, were sitting at home, and my mom was pregnant, and my dad they were watching your Show of Shows, which was a TV show, Sid Caesar, Imogene Coke, and Howie Morris and Carl Reiner. So they're watching this show, and there's a This Is Your Life episode of the show, a parody of This Is Your Life, and they take Sid Caesar out of the audience against his will, and they say, "This is your life," and they tell him his life. And Howie Morris comes out as his Uncle Goopy, and Uncle Goopy and Sid Caesar's character apparently had a very intimate relationship because Uncle Goopy just smothers Sid Caesar with affection, kissing him, and he's like humping his leg. And so anyway, in 1954, it was a pretty outrageous sketch, and my parents are laughing so hard that they literally fall out of their chairs. They're laughing so hard at Howie Morris humping Sid Caesar's leg. And my mother broke water, and the next 3 hours later at like 12:55 a.m., she gave birth to me. So I went up to Howie and I said, "Howie, you are responsible for my birthday," because I was early.
That's a great connection.
So yeah, born with laughter from Howie Morris.
Well, inspiration.
Yes.
So since we were talking just about you drawing and animating, I wanted to ask you did some animation for Hanna Barbera.
I did.
But your career ended up not being too long from what I gather from your IMDb page. Why did you leave animation to kind of focus more on like story?
Good question. I began as an animator, started as an assistant animator to Hanna Barbera, worked for great Rudy Cataldi, Bolas Jones, just brilliant animators. And I was, like all the other assistants, we were cleaning up and we were doing in-betweens. So I'll date myself. That was from 78 to 80. And in 1980, Hanna-Barbera got into an arrangement with James Wong at Cuckoo's Nest. Bill Hanna said, "Let's ship a lot of our stuff to James, who can handle a lot of this." And so I saw the writing on the wall, and I was not one of the great animators at the place. I mean, there are artists, draftsmen that were just brilliant. I mean, they could, you look at what they're drawing and you're just amazed. So I thought, well, if I were Hanna-Barbera, I'd get rid of me pretty quick because they're shipping everything overseas. So I went home. It was Christmas holiday, and I wrote a spec script called Pitts and His Pal. And it was about, it was two, anthropomorphized dogs. And Pitts was a manic depressive pit bull who was trying to commit suicide. And his pal was sort of a fedora wearing hound dog. And he wanted to save Pitts from killing himself. So it was like a Wile E. Coyote cartoon in that every time his name was Hunter tried to save Pitts from annihilating, like he'd have a safe drop on him or he'd stand in front of a railroad tracks and get run over. His pal would run in and save him, but get annihilated. in the process. So it was a repetitive, sort of very violent and hopefully funny cartoon. So I sent it around to all the different studios, and Filmation, Arthur Nadell at Filmation, dear old Arthur, he read it and said, well, yeah, we're going to hire you. Come on in. But, we're never making this cartoon, right? We're not making cartoons about suicidal dogs. Do you understand that, right? And I said, yes, I do. So I started writing immediately on, the first thing I wrote was a Flash Gordon, where there was a baby dragon, I think, in the Flash Gordon show, but I'm blanking. It's like Godzuki, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
And and then we did Paul Dini and I. We met working on something called Sport Billy, which I think may be the worst cartoon ever made. And but then we did a Lone Ranger and Zorro and the Wild Wild West, Tarzan. Lots of action adventure shows. And then there was something called Hero High, in which the first iteration of the Brain appears. But he doesn't look like the Brain, but he calls himself, hey, I'm the Brain. See, yeah, I'm smart, yeah. It's like
and Hero High was originally supposed to be the Archie gang, correct?
Certainly was very much like the Archie gang. I don't know if Lou Scheimer and Norm Prescott approached the Archie people on that. I was just told, just start writing that. And the last thing I wrote there was Gilligan's Planet, and I said, okay, I got to go now.
I do want to mention, I saw when I went through your IMDb, you did write one of my favorite Filmation shows, which was Black Star. So that was...
See, I forgot about. See, that was my show. If there's anything I did at Filmation that was sort of like I put a lot of myself into it, it was that, because I was, while Arthur's listed as a story editor, I really kind of shepherded that whole series and wrote a bunch of them. And it really was a pretty good adventure show. It had too many Trobits in it. I know that. But and Frank Welker, I know he did one of the Trobits. He did it as Walter Brennan, and he does a damn good Walter Brennan. So and that show was the reason Mattel called up Lou Scheimer and said, "Hey, you got this show called Black Star. We like that, so we want to do something like that, but we don't want to pay you. So we're going to do this." So that's how He-Man came about, with Lou Scheimer and Mattel working together.
Okay. Let me just ask you one more question about Filmation, because you said you worked on Lone Ranger, you worked on all these things. You worked on Black Star, which was an original creation.
That's right.
But the others were licensed characters, Flash Gordon, Zorro, Lone Ranger, all those characters, even Tarzan. What is it like writing for an original character versus a licensed character that has history behind it?
Well,
Star right there.
Yeah, it's Black Star. And he had a great dragon that he rode on. Ooh.
Yeah, Grimlock, I think it was called.
Oh, yeah, right? Look at that beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And there were a whole bunch of pretty interesting characters there. And Michael Reeves and Mark Edens did a great job on writing a bunch of the scripts. I loved working on Black Star. So much, and I like the Lone Ranger. I like Wild Wild West is interesting. I like Zorro, but Black Star you're creating a universe. And so Bob Klein was the lead artist on that show, and he created a universe, beautifully done. And the only drawback to any of these projects at Filmation, the drawback was the stock system that they insisted on using to an extreme degree. Yeah. So, Black Star would land on a ridge, and he'd overlook, and there's a city exploding in the background. And, oh my gosh, look at that city exploding, and you didn't see it. Yeah. You'd get some color blast. Oh, that's terrible. Oh, well, that city's gone. Yeah. And so they really minimized the amount of animation they used in an episode. Gilligan's Planet was the same thing where, look out, Skipper, there's a coconut falling on your head. Boom. Oh, Skipper. and you never saw it.
Yeah.
It was always Filmation, especially. They always had like those same close-up shots of the characters from like stuff.
From
you
up, but
That's
it
right.
wasn't.
Yeah, exactly.
But wasn't it Hanna-Barbera who really did that kind of off-screen thing? But Hanna-Barbera would shake the frames, right? But to say somebody exploded or something happened to save money, but Filmation comes, I don't even think they move the screen to make it look like something is going on or showing smoke from the city exploding, right? They
Well, I
kept
think
it.
definitely Hanna-Barbera with Huck and Yogi and Quick Draw, they created limited animation. I mean, of course, Rocky and Bullwinkle get a say in that, but they really would crash the screens a lot with the Hanna-Barbera product. Hanna-Barbera also had a stock system. When I first arrived in '78, Vicky Casper was in charge of the stock system, and no matter what show you're working on, and I was working on Godzilla, and there was a Scooby show then, there was a Casper show, there was the new Fred and Barney show.
Yes.
And she had folders and folders of stock animation, not footage, but she had the stacks of drawings that you could then reuse and expose and put into the sheets to cover certain scenes. There was a great the Scooby scene is probably the most famous bit of animation on Scooby, where Scooby and Shaggy are running. They're running along, and then they skid to a stop, and they scramble, and they turn around and go the other way. It's a beautiful piece of animation because Scooby's an involved-looking character. So we would use the heck out of that. We'd go, I need the scene, Vicky. Come on, let's, because it could chew up a little bit of time.
Gotcha. Now, let me just ask, because you had experience at Filmation, you had experience at Hanna-Barbera, and I mean, until really Warner Brothers in like the late 80s, early 90s, and Disney at that point too. I mean, these were the two big powerhouses for syndication cartoons and Saturday morning cartoons. Like, what was the feeling in those buildings? Because I mean, they had so many shows going at the same time, so it must have been like crazy going there.
This is at Hanna-Barbera?
Hanna-Barbera and Filmation, because they were just churning out so much material at those in like the late 70s, 80s.
Yeah, when we were doing Black Star at Filmation, my buddy Charlie Howell and Tom Minton, they were working on Tom and Jerry. And it was like, oh, wait, I like doing the Black Star thing. Oh, you're doing Black Star. But I wanted to do Tom and Jerry and Droopy, and they were doing, but dang, when you put those shows through the stock system, it doesn't. It's a mess. Yeah. You can't really get away with it. Hanna-Barbera. When I got my job at Hanna-Barbera with Bill Hanna as an animator, I had driven from New Jersey, and I was at a motel, and I called up everybody in town from this payphone at the motel. It was out front. They didn't have phones in the room. This was a long time ago. And this was a phone booth that was very much busy with women who used it as their trade they would get calls, and then they would go to a location, and that's what they did. It was a very, anyway, but they were nice, but that phone was a busy phone. So I was out there using their phone, and they said, hurry it up. There's a business line. Come on. So I called up Hanna-Barbera, and they said, who would you like to speak to? I said, Bill Hanna. I didn't know anybody. And so Bill Hanna's secretary, Ginger, picks up and says, and she takes well, I don't know. He's very busy. If he wants to call you, he'll call you. What's your number? So I gave him the phone booth number. No. And went back to my little hovel of a room. And like an hour later, I get on my door. He said, are you Ruegger? I said, yeah. I opened the door, and it's one of the lovely women of the phone booth. And she says, you got a call out there, but hurry up. I'm expecting a really important call. So I run out there. It's, please hold for Bill Hanna. Yes. And he, hello, who is it? And I said, oh, Mr. Hanna, it's Tom Ruegger. I came from New Jersey. I just drove out, and I'm an animator, and I'd get over here immediately. We're really busy. So I drove over. They were making they had been it was June, and Joe Barbera had just sold something like 25 shows, something ridiculous. And they needed everybody that could hold a pencil on the planet to draw on this stuff. So Bill and I went in there. I had my 16 millimeter film, and he said, we don't have a 16 millimeter projector. What are you doing? And so I had left my portfolio at Bakshi's, so all I had was a portfolio in slides. Mm-hmm. So he's like looking at my slides up at the window. He said, "What the hell is that?" And I said, that's a dog. Not where I come from. Anyway, he gave me a 1-month trial, and I survived the trial. Uh-huh. And but that year and the year I left ultimately a few years later, and I came back after Filmation. When Barbera had done the same thing, he had sold another like 25 shows, and they were looking for writers. And so I met him. It was like visiting the Godfather, Joe Barbera. And I sat there, and he told me, he described a Yogi Bear cartoon. I said, oh, and I'm thinking to myself, I love Yogi Bear. I would love to work. I hope I get put on a Yogi Bear cartoon if he hires me. He tells me this Yogi Bear cartoon about kids in a bus saying, look at the bears, and I'm thinking, I think I've seen that cartoon. Why is he telling me that? So he's making up a cartoon in front of me, and then he pushes a button, and Margaret Lesh comes in out of nowhere, and she said, yeah, this guy's good, hire him. And because all I did was listen to him. And so anyway, Margaret hires me, and there was no Yogi Bear show. He just likes talking about Yogi Bear. And he's just a great guy, and he taught me so many things about how to make something funnier and faster and quicker. And on Pup Named Scooby Doo, he knew I was doing the big Tex Avery gags. Mm-hmm. And Joe Barbera called me and said, now, what you want to do, because I had met Tex before he passed away. Tex, these gags need equally crazed, intense sound effects. So it's not just the visual, but you need something super big behind the sound of behind the big visuals, big sound effects. So I wasn't necessarily acutely aware of that. So that was very helpful to hear that from him. So anyway, that year when Barbera hired me, it was so busy at Hanna Barbera, they didn't even have separate rooms for the writers. So I was put in a room with a guy named Hank Saroyan, who at that moment was the story editor of Scooby Doo. Mm-hmm. And he said, you want to write one of these Scoobys? I said, I'd like to. So I wrote No Sharking Zone. That was the first Scooby I wrote. I took home a bunch of Scoobies that weekend to learn, because I had never really watched Scooby.
And is this at this point, this is like where it's just Scooby, Shaggy, and Scrappy, right?
That's right. It's Scooby, Shaggy, Scrappy, and Daphne.
Oh, and okay. So when they're like working for the newspaper, then
it's the foursome. Yes, the foursome.
Got
it. And so about a week later, everybody said, "Hey, everybody likes your script. I don't want to do this story editing job anymore. It's yours." So within a week being there, I was the story editor of Scooby.
Wow.
And honestly, the week before, I had never even seen a Scooby. Wow. So I was now the story editor of Scooby Doo, which is, I know how wrong that sounds, because there were so many great fans that why should some schmuck from New Jersey suddenly be the Scooby story editor when he hadn't watched any? And, it's timing, it's luck, it's right place, right time. Anyway, it was a great, great gig, and I learned to love Scooby very quickly, and Shaggy, and it was great to just see those guys performing. And Heather North did Daphne, and Don Messick could actually say dialogue from Scooby and Scrappy at the same time. Yeah. He could have them both falling off a cliff, and you hear them both coming out of his voice. It's like wild.
No, I mean, at that point, too, let me just ask, because after that iteration of Scooby and before Pup Named Scooby, and I'm sure it was a thrill, you had 13 Ghosts of Scooby with Vincent Price, who must have been everybody loves Vincent Price. So that must have been a thrill. What was the story behind 13 Ghosts, really?
The story behind 13 Ghosts is Mitch Shower. Mitch Shower just a brilliant artist, and he had been doing storyboards and various things at Hanna Barbera for years, and he was there, and I was there, and we had made, I don't know what the order was. Did we do Pound Puppies before or after that? But anyway, we wanted to do some Scooby stuff. ABC was thinking we need to change things up on Scooby. Now, Mitch Schauer is an aficionado of the Universal horror movies. He loves like Lon Chaney Jr. as the Wolfman, and he could draw these things. He's such a great artist, Mitch. He could put his pen or pencil down on a piece of paper and draw literally anything and never even have to pick the pencil up. It's unbelievable. And he does caricatures of people and just amazing. So he wanted to do a Universal Horrors movie version of Scooby Doo. And I'd say that the Zomba episode,
Gotcha.
where they go into the Frankenstein movie and it's sort of black and white, I'd say that's maybe one of the closest iterations of the vision of Mitch Schauer, because it's such a beautiful, complicated episode. But the first episode's really good too, and it's just very dramatic. It's like serious. It's like real almost.
Yeah. A different tone.
Yeah, and it Shaggy's got a new red shirt on. It's
Daphne looks completely different.
And then of course Flim Flam comes in, and that was a network request that we wanted to. They felt that the show needed a kid so that the kids can relate. And so that's where Flim Flam came from. And I know there's a lot of hate toward Flim Flam, and not like Scrappy. I mean, Scrappy was in the show too, and boy, he gets a lot of no love.
And also he had Remorse back in that, and he was with Artie Johnson, Bogle and Weird.
Bogle and Weird, yeah, that's right. That's our buddy, Howie Morris, and they were great. I love both of them. So that was, and sadly, after the 13th episode of that moment was the first time since 1969 that a new set of Scooby-Doo episodes was in production. Mm-hmm. So there was a year off of no new Scoobies.
And they just, because they just completed that storyline. They did a movie. Like, was there ever at that point they wanted it to be just that one season, or did they want to do a second season, or they just the network something different? You don't know.
Yeah, I think our ratings were actually very good, but you honestly never know what makes the decision. It's often a money decision, or they've made a deal with someone else to put a show on, and suddenly they don't have the real estate. It's very bizarre. But that show probably, that could have lasted longer.
Yeah. So let's go to one of our viewers here, Joe Ryan.
Yes.
Put up his question here.
I'll put it up. Yeah. Well, that didn't sound good. But, Joe Ryan says, you created many great shows in the 1990s. Do you have any advice for a cartoonist trying to break in today? Maybe some advice on what they look for in a Warner Brothers animation portfolio today. I'm a graduate of the Joe Kubert School and would love to hear some of your thoughts. Thanks.
Well, Joe, I think, by the way, Joe, if this advice sounds wrong to you, you don't have to listen to what I'm saying here. I've told this to my sons. I've told this to other people, and they think I'm crazy. Mm-hmm. But I think it's important to be very persistent. If you have talent and you want to show it off, you literally need to go show it off. I actually believe that you should show up at the place where you want to work. I know that's what sounds crazy, but I have friends who wanted to work on South Park. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, why don't you go over to their studio? They're only working a certain number of months a year. just go there, and when they're in production, and stop in and say you want to work there.
Yeah.
And now I know it doesn't sound like it's going to work, and it probably doesn't work a lot of the time, but now and then it does work. And one of my buddies got in there. So get your portfolio together, make it reflect the stuff that you really like doing, because you don't want to get a job and you're doing stuff that you hate. So in other words, if you if you dislike Batman, no one dislikes it, but you don't want to apply for the storyboard job on Batman. But if you want to do the comedy, apply for the comedy gigs. I know so many people that wind up on shows that they don't naturally feel comfortable with, but they learn to deal with it. So advice for today's market: you want to meet and get together with as many people in the business as you can. You definitely want to do the networking, because all the jobs today, one of your buddies has a gig, and hey, I know someone that would be really good for this. Many jobs are through the people that you know who are on something and think you would be a big help. I find that agents aren't going to get you the gig. Rarely. They're going to help negotiate the gig, but they're not going to find it for you.
Okay. That's good advice.
Yeah,
Sorry, Mike, you had something to say?
I was going to say, so now we've kind of talked about Hanna Barbera, Filmation, Scooby Doo.
Yeah.
So you had that transition, and the guys behind you on the wall, Tiny Toon Adventures.
Yes.
That was your next big adventure there.
Yes. Actually, do you mind if I ask one more Hanna Barbera question before we go on to Tiny Toons? Because I really want to get to all that stuff. That is a lot of my inspiration to make me an artist these days. But Hanna Barbera, you said you were a fan growing up of Huckleberry Hound and Yogi Bear and all those. You wrote episodes of Yogi's Treasure Hunt. What was it like for you to write the characters that you loved as a child?
That was, I think, one of my favorite writing experiences was working on Yogi's Treasure Hunt. And again, that show doesn't get a tremendous amount of love.
Oh, I love it.
John Layton and I, we were the story editors of that show. And we grabbed that show. When we heard that there was this whole Hanna-Barbera world of whatever it was like a 2-hour block on Sunday mornings.
A
fantastic world of Hanna-Barbera. Fantastic. And Yogi was going to be like the centerpiece of this thing, because they even had Yogi in live action wraparounds. Luden and I grabbed that and we ran. We didn't let anybody. We didn't let Glenn Leopold get it or anyone else. So, and we loved all the characters we put in it. So, and one of the great experiences was being with Dawes Butler and Don Messick and Paul Winchell on a regular basis. Wow. And these guys are, they were my childhood. Paul Winchell, Jerry Mahoney show, but all, Tigger, but Dawes Butler, he would stop by after the recording session. He'd come into our office, Luden in my office, and we were right along the corridor that was the entrance and exit. So both these guys, Messick would and Paul Winchell would, and so Dawes would give us little lessons on which character needed a little help as far as he was concerned about the dialogue, because he knew how Quick Draw would turn a phrase, and we didn't know it as well as he did. And Baba Louie, I don't think Baba Louie was in it. It was he had some great tips on
Snooper and Blabber.
Snooper and Blabber too. Yeah. Evidently, Blab. Yeah. Gee, Snoop, you're the greatest. So yeah, I'll do the thinning around here. His dialogue stuff. Let me stay right there. Yeah. I'm gonna get something.
Okay.
Yeah, guys. As you're watching, we have a bunch of people in here tonight. Feel free to ask your questions with Tom.
Hold on, I'm going to give you the screen.
So this is hard to see. Oh,
hold on. Not removed from stream. I want to give you the solo layout. There you go.
There it is. This is from Dawes Butler. This is from The Good, the Bad, and the Huckleberry. And as you can see, it says, "To Tom, who loves my singing, I do too." Dawes Butler, which was from 1986. Wow.
That's great. And I have to say, The Good, the Bad, and the Huckleberry is one of my favorite Hanna Barbera movies.
Oh, thank you so much.
I watch it at least once a year. I kind of just do a sit down, and I mean, it's a fun. I love Westerns. I love Huck, so.
I love that one too. And there's a great recap in the middle of it that I just love.
Yeah.
That the Superstars 10 series, that was a phenomenal series when they did.
They had a lot of, some of them felt a little padded, but Barbera really cared about those. He put a lot of effort into it. And before we move on to Warner Brothers, just on the Hanna Barbera front, on a pup named Scooby Doo, just a real pleasure. The cast was great, and it was great seeing having Don Messick and Casey Kasem. I think that was the last time Don did Scooby. I'm not sure, but it might be.
Well, he did that Arabian Nights film, and then because that Pup Named Scooby came after the Superstars 10, so Arabian Nights I think was probably the last Scooby thing they did together.
All right.
So Warner Brothers. Pup Named Scooby happened, and I guess probably around that time you probably were starting to have those conversations over at Warner's for Tiny Toons and.
Well, it wasn't really concurrent. What happened was. I had done the first season of Scooby, starting a pup named Scooby was starting the second, starting to talk stories, and Gene McCurdy, who was my boss at Hanna Barbera, had gone over to Warner Brothers, and she had a tape of my Scooby show, and she showed it to somebody, and they said, "Oh yeah, that's good." So she calls me up one evening and said, "Can you meet me at the Lemon Tree?" I think it was. And it was in Burbank. And so I met her, and she said, "Hey, here at Warner Brothers, Bob Daly, Terry Semel, and Steven Spielberg have gotten together, and they want to make a TV show called Tiny Toons. Would you like to come make that?" And I said, no. I said, "Yes, I'd like to." So I literally went to Hanna-Barbera the next day. I went to Bill and I went to Joe, and I said, "Hey, McCurdy just offered me this gig to work with Spielberg on a cartoon show." And I had a contract with Bill and Joe. And I said, "Can you let me out?" And they said, "Yeah, sure. I mean, we wish you luck and it's all good." So that day I left Hanna-Barbera. So it wasn't concurrent. It was like, boom, I stopped doing Scooby. And the next day I'm doing Tiny Toons, developing Tiny Toons, because they didn't have anything on Tiny Toons. It was just like,
kind of like what you just said to Joe. Somebody in the business, they recommended you for a job, and that's how it works.
Exactly. And how about this? The one drawing they had for Tiny Toons, which was spelled Tunes, by the way, Tiny Toons.
Okay.
The one drawing they had was of a rabbit-like Buster, drawn in the rings, drawn by Mitch Shower, the producer and artist of 13 Ghosts. So McCurdy went back to the well with us, and so within a week, I'm in a meeting Mr. Spielberg for the first time, and we hit it off. I told him I wanted to make shorts. I wanted the music to be like Carl Stalling, and basically I told him about my favorite cartoons on the planet, which were Daffy and Porky and Bugs. And that I'd love to emulate those and bring them back to life. And anyway, it worked out well.
And this was really the first big Looney Tunes project after Mel Blanc had passed away at that point too.
Yes, and we were thinking we were going to use was it Noel Blanc? Is that
yeah, he was the son.
We were thinking we were going to probably use him to do some of the Looney Tunes characters, but turns out the voice acting community very competitive and very some very aggressive to get the gig, and a lot of very talented people. Jeff Bergman, I think, ultimately got several of the Looney Tune characters to handle on the new series.
Okay. Well, you got into Tiny Toons. I had a Tiny Toons question. I can't remember it right now, but you said
we'll get back to it.
Yeah, you got. Well, actually, this is kind of goes into it. You were talking about you were there through the development. What aspect of the development process were you actually part of? I mean, did you help
There was no development of it.
Okay.
until I got hired.
Okay.
And I hired Wayne Katz, who had been working on Pound Puppies with me and on Scooby, and then within a week we had I had Alfred Gimeno and Ken Boyer joining the two of us, Wayne and me. We were writing stuff, and they drew everything we wrote.
Okay.
And so within that first week, we were getting together, and I was just writing. I was writing sort of the point of the series. What's it about? It's these young people who love and adore Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck, and they want to be just like them. So they're trying to, so they're almost like apprentices. Mm-hmm. And that's the week when we came up with Acme Acres and Acme University. So it was all in that 1 week. And then I went to Steven's office at Amblin, expecting to see him, and he was just like a little speaker. He wasn't there; it was just a phone. And so I pitched him the whole show, and he said, "Yeah, that sounds great. Let's do that." He was very positive. And so that was the first meeting. I mean, there were many, many meetings after that. It took us months, literally months, to nail down the characters' names. Not that we didn't have shows in the works and we were writing scripts and we were doing storyboards, but the characters' names, we couldn't get clearance from the legal department because every name we came up with, it's been taken, it's being this, we'd have to pay somebody. So that's why you wind up getting, pretty weird, like Furball. That's not a bad name, but he had probably a dozen names. Plucky had a dozen names. Buster had a dozen names.
Mm-hmm. Now, these characters, I mean, initially, were they ever intended to be the offspring of classic characters? I know that circulated for a while.
By the time I was involved, from what I remember, prior to me getting called over, they wanted to make a movie, a Tiny Toons movie, which initially Steven said, it'd be like the kids of Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck, and it'd be like the next generation. And Warner Brothers and Steven were fiddling around with that for I think a year. Mm-hmm. And I think what kiboshed that is that Warner Brothers had a bunch of licensees for Looney Tunes characters, whether it's T-shirts or food or mm-hmm. Products, and those licensees have certain inalienable rights mm-hmm. to the characters and to the merchandise. And Steven coming in with new characters wanted to keep them away from that batch of licensees, and in other words, separate the pots of money. And it was just too complicated to have them be related. Then it became a very Looney Tunes project, and Warner Brothers decided we want this to be its own entity. So what would have happened if it became an issue was Bugs and Daffy would have been jettisoned. In other words, the key was to have new characters, new shows. So it worked out beautifully to have them as teachers.
And now, because I mean, essentially, this was like a great test for Warner Brothers too, because after Tiny Toon Adventures, there was it opened the floodgates, like with Batman. I mean, certainly Batman in the cinemas was doing quite well, and then obviously,
the Tiny Toons show itself was a huge hit because it had a touch of irreverence, which the Disney Afternoon was not delivering. So it didn't read as very young. It read like it was for like maybe 11, 12-year-olds. And Babs was very sassy. Plucky mm-hmm. was a real jerk. So it really it fed an audience that was underserved in that day part. And our ratings were through the roof. Mm-hmm. So, so McCurdy and I are, getting a lot of, and everybody on staff, we're getting a lot of kudos from everyone. And So McCurdy at one point says, "Oh, by the way, at a group meeting of the whole staff, there's interest in a Batman animated show." And Bruce Timm and Eric Radomski jumped right on that. Of course, while Tiny Toons was making some money, the real money was coming from that Batman movie, Tim Burton's movie. I mean, that was just licensed to print money.
Yeah.
So the Batman series was, a completely different kettle of fish and beautifully executed. And while that was succeeding, that's when we started developing Animaniacs.
Mm-hmm. I mean, and Animaniacs, to this day is just still a huge powerhouse. Music, the voice actors, like Rob Paulson, Marisa Marsh from Pinky and the Brain, Tress MacNeille, and Jess Harnell. They're all amazing people. We've met
my Animaniacs here.
They bring so much. Randy Rogel's music. It's writing, everything on that show. How did that initially come about? And shifting from Tiny Toons to Animaniacs. Because
right. Well, we had made almost 100 Tiny Toons, and but before we were done with those, Stephen and Gene McCurdy called me and they said, "Okay, what's next?" And I was like, "What?" I was kind of tired. So, well, what would be a good follow-up to Tiny Toons? Do you have another show idea? And I said, "Yeah, I'd like to do something that has nothing to do with all the other characters we've been dealing with, just something really original." And Stephen at first balked at it. He thought, "Well, I think we should do a spin-off, maybe do the Plucky Duck show." And and I said, I think honestly, we've all been doing a lot of Tiny Toons. I think everybody's a little burned out on them. I think we should try something new. And he said, "Okay, but I need it to be, if it's going to be new, it needs to have a name behind it." I said, "Well, you're the name behind it." "No, it needs to have a marquee name." Steven Spielberg presents a marquee. No. It needs to be, like Plucky Duck Show. It needs to have a name. And I thought, that's what's going to screw me up, because I want to do something completely original. So Animaniacs, I had the freedom to be creative and come up with some brand new stuff for Animaniacs. The key to that show was, we had some brilliant artists, but we also had some brilliant writers. And I always, I always want to thank for that show, Rich Ahrens, who directed and drew the main title, and Richard Stone, who did all the music with the Bernsteins and several other great musicians. But and we had great directors and great artists, but there are some writers behind that show that really, are the heart and soul of the Animaniacs creation. Because you see, it's a very funny show. And people really appreciate it. And there's been this world of talk over the years that writers shouldn't write animation. Animation should only be drawn by crews of storyboard artists and everything. Well, and sometimes that's great, and sometimes that's right, but Animaniacs would not exist today, and you wouldn't love that show today if it hadn't been for some absolutely brilliant writing by people like Paul Rugg, Sherry Stoner, Peter Hastings, John McCann, Deanna Oliver, Nick Hollander, Charlotte Morgan Howell, Gordon Bresack, Earl Kress. These people lived and breathed this show along with me, and we just it was our chance to be really funny and to make it happen. And then, so we got these great scripts, and the board artists and the directors were having fun with them. And then we went to the recording sessions, and Andrea Romano, totally got it. She had been doing all the Tiny Toon directing. And so we just had it was a perfect gathering of creative people in their prime. And then we had the good fortune and the smarts to select just the right cast members. Tress was an easy one to pick. Rob, we kind of loaded the deck when we sent the auditions out to Steven. We put they were blind auditions, so he didn't know who was talking, but we had 3 Robs in there. And then, of course, Maurice, and then Jess Harnell, we found him at the last minute. Mm-hmm. So, and then, but the beauty of it was we had this freedom to literally make cartoons. What cartoon do you want to make today? I mean, as you know, that show goes all over the place. Yeah. And one of the beautiful things of it is that Steven said, go make it, Tom, have fun with it. And he went off and directed Schindler's List. And we got to stay back and make cartoons.
I have to say, I should have mentioned with Tiny Toons as well. The 2 movies that you guys made, How I Spent My Vacation for Tiny Toons and Wackos Wish, those are movies that should have found their way to the cinemas. I know Batman: Mask of the Phantasm, they took a gamble on, but those 2 movies, to this day, I can still watch and enjoy both. Yeah. My son loves Wackos Wish. We watch it every Christmas.
See, I think Wackos Wish is really worthy of being on the big screen. And the 2 screenings, the 2 theatrical screenings of those 2 movies, I attended both. The first, the Tiny Toons movie was in, I'm blanking on the name. It was in Illinois. So it was in this theater that was, it was really deep. The theater was like a bowling alley. Mm-hmm. It was like a mile to the back of the theater, and the picture and the sound was playing to the front. In the back, there was a delay on the sound, and everything was out of sync. Oh. So not ideal. Wackos Wish played to a test audience extremely well, to the point where it deserved to be released as a theatrical. But Bob Daly turned to me, he's the head of Warner Brothers, and he said, you got 10 million? I said, what do you mean? Well, to put these things out, you need 10 million to spend on the advertising, and I don't know where I'm going to get it. And that's really what happened there.
Gotcha. Ken Mendoza, one of our viewers, he wants to know, how did you feel about the PSA episode of Tiny Toons regarding Buster Hampton and Plucky drinking?
Oh, well, it wasn't a PSA, was it? It was.
It kind of felt that way.
One beer, and so the 3 of them split 1 beer, so 12 ounces. So it'd be 4 ounces of beer apiece, and then they became so horribly messed up drunk that they drove a car off a cliff and died, and went to heaven, and. I don't know. I thought it was pretty funny, but the parents weren't crazy about that.
Yeah. I actually have an Animaniacs question for you. Now, first of all, I've always said this: the Animaniacs were my version of Looney Tunes. Growing up, you guys parodied, people that I was familiar with instead of having to look back. Although I love the classic Looney Tunes, and the show really was off the wall. It was zany. I mean, I love the humor, but one of my favorite shorts, I believe, how do you say it? Nick Hollander wrote it?
Yes.
And it wasn't funny, had no real humor of it, and it was A Gift of Gold.
Yes.
You remember this episode?
I do.
How, and you used it twice, too. I don't know if you remember that. One was a birthday episode, and then you used it in the winter, for Christmas, in the Christmas.
Oh, yeah, in the Christmas wrapper, yeah. I think we did that rarely, yeah. That's good.
How
I'll
was
tell you about that one. You want to know where that came from?
Well, it was, I do, but I was I wanted to know, how is it putting something like that doesn't have humor, that has a lot of meaning behind it, into a humorous show and making it work, Yeah.
Well, Nick was good at that. He did a B one. He did something called Putting on the Blitz, which was really, it was a Rita and Runt one that was almost made you cry.
Yeah, some of those did.
So this one, Nick, he wanted to do something about the holidays, but he wasn't sure what. And so we're in a meeting, and Steven starts talking about some party he was with his kid, and the kid's young, and the kid unwraps this gift and the wrapping paper was so sparkly and exciting that the kid just pushed the gift aside and just played with the wrapping paper.
Interesting.
And so that's what gave Nick the idea of a gift of gold. And the sweet words in it are all Nick, but Stephen definitely had a sort of a spark to make that story happen.
Yeah, that's to this day my favorite short of the bits that aren't humorous.
Right. Yeah, that's a beauty.
Yeah.
And then I like the ones, and I can't the name escape, but the ones with the flame, like Paul Revere's Ride.
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
That's
Yeah.
nice too.
It started with Jefferson writing the Declaration of Independence, and then Paul Revere's Ride, and then there was another one about the Scott Key American flag. Yeah.
Yeah, those were great. Go ahead.
As a teacher, I mean, I teach middle school social studies.
Oh,
so
perfect.
I am using Animaniacs. We're doing World War II. We just did the Depression, so I was doing all the stuff from Hysteria. I have the box set, so I've been showing.
That's great. Hysteria really covered some World War II ground. Yeah.
Yeah. We just did the Invasion song, which is a great one.
Yeah.
Which is
the Germans invaded everyone.
Exactly. My co-teacher's like, should we be showing this? Because but I was like, it shows. I'm not from the thing. She's like, it kind of goes all over the place. But I'm like, the Germans really did take over the world essentially in Europe.
You know what? Randy and I went to this big press event before the Hysteria went on the air, and so we showed some clips and we showed that song, and I forget exactly what reporter from what nation made an objection to the song. Well, that's not true what you're saying there. Germany didn't invade them. Iran did. And so Randy and I are up there. We're like, well, we don't really understand now. We also had a guy that insisted Hannibal. Or I forget. We had people calling up about Hysteria, like protesting certain things in certain stories. We had Stalin, my big brother Stalin, that got people very upset. We had the Spanish Inquisition, Catholics called it. So it's tricky. It's tricky out there.
Yeah.
Well, so and certainly, I mean, as we're talking about Hysteria, we're talking about Animaniacs. So one thing we need to mention too is like it certainly was a family affair. Your sons were voices in both series.
Yes.
That's right. Luke did the Flame. Nathan played Skippy, and Cody played the little bluebird, and he's in just 3 little cartoons, which is where the mama has gone away, and he thinks that a Lear some kind of assault airplane or jet is his mother. Stealth bomber. He thinks that's his mother. But then Cody sang the 12 Days of Christmas as the little bluebird on Animaniacs, where the song goes, on the 12th day of Christmas, my true love gave to me 12 turtle doves, 11 turtle doves, 10 turtle doves, 9 turtle doves, 8 turtle doves. It goes on, 5 turtle doves. So Randy and Robert doing their show around Animaniacs live concerts, and they're in New York a few months ago, and Cody went, and they brought him up on stage, and he's 30 now, and he sang as the little bluebird the 12 Days of Christmas, and great. To rousing applause.
That's great. That's fantastic.
Because I know we're running short on time.
Oh, and here. Luke, we did Luke, right? He did the Flame. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And wasn't he one of your kids also? I think wasn't he in Tiny Toons, young like Baby Plucky?
Yes, Baby Plucky was. Nathan did the voice. The stories of Baby Plucky, the toilet thing, water go down the hole. Those were all lines directly taken from Cody. And so that cartoon was the easiest cartoon I ever wrote in my life, because I was just transcribing what had happened.
The one thing I did want to definitely ask about before we left, and I saw this on your blog, and I've been fascinated by this, mixed nuts.
Yeah.
Show I think us and a lot of people would have loved to have seen. Why didn't they bite at that?
Well, you mentioned at the top of the show that Hanna Barbera is creating a whole sort of universe, Hanna Barbera universe, with the new Scooby, And Mixed Nuts, I went in, I pitched it. A guy named Brad Globe was in charge of merchandising at this meeting where I pitched it. And a lot of the images that you see in my blog are part of the pitch. He literally looked at me and said, "We're buying the show." And I was like, yes. Well, Brad's gone. Sam Register came in, and he became, at that point, became the head of Warner Brothers Television Animation. And I think he had some other plans for the Looney Tunes that didn't kind of connect with this material. So that's probably why, that's one of the reasons it didn't happen, I guess.
And then recently you've been involved, you did 7D for Disney.
Yes.
So other than that too, where else can people find you? What else are you doing right now?
Well, I'm doing some stuff with Paul Dini. We have an animated series we've been developing, and I'm doing an action adventure neo-noir dramatic animated series, and that's about to be presented to the world, and we'll see what happens. We're out lining up a buyer.
Nice. Are you involved in the Animaniacs reboot for?
I have no one that worked on the original. Tony Craig did some boards on the original, and he's doing some boards on the new one. Randy Rogel, who wrote a few songs on the original, is writing a few songs for this. Other than that, I don't know of anybody from the original show that's involved, which, they're doing their own thing with it. I don't know.
All right. If you don't mind, I know we're short on time here. I just have two quick questions for you. The first one is, you've done a lot of stuff: action, adventure, comedy. You're working on your new one right now, you just mentioned. What do you prefer to write? Do you prefer comedy? Do you prefer like the sci-fi? What do you like doing the best?
Definitely. I love comedy. I love to laugh. The thing I'm doing with Deanie, Paul Rugg did voices on it, and whenever I'm near Paul Rugg, I'm laughing. So life is good when Paul Rugg's nearby.
Okay.
And I've also done a lot of little development things with Sherry and Deanna and John McCann and Paul Rugg. So I have a bunch of little animatics that I've been making over the years, and those guys make me laugh. So I want to do comedy.
All right, cool. And the other question is, everyone has a dream project that, whether it's something that's been out and you would love to redevelop, something you've worked on, you'd like to bring. I know for myself, one of the things you've worked on is Black Star. That's my dream project to revamp. It was such a big piece of my childhood in the idea of sci-fi adventure and fantasy. Sorry, Mike's back. And so do you have something like that you've worked on or never worked on that I want to get my hands on it?
Yeah, I do, but we should talk.
All right, I'll be happy to.
Yeah. The Black Star thing, I'm really glad you like that. I do have this one new comedy idea that I'm very excited about. But you know what? They all take time, and they all take, there's a lot of drawing. And
yeah.
Anyway, but yeah, let's talk about that.
I'll be happy to.
Great.
I'll send you an email.
Beautiful. Perfect.
All right.
I've sent you, Michael Grassia, the link to Tom's blog.
Oh,
yes, we will post that. I'm actually having a problem with my second monitor right now to share it.
Okay.
I would have loved to have gone on, and I was going to pull it up earlier, but my second monitor just disconnected somehow. So right before we started.
This has been a lot of fun. Yeah.
I mean, and certainly we would love to have you come back. I mean, there are so many. We didn't really get into 7D. We didn't get into Freakazoid. I mean,
let's do this again when you guys can fit it in.
Oh, absolutely.
Totally.
That'd be great.
Absolutely. So, no, thank you so much again for taking. Oh, there we go. We got it in the blog.
Yeah, I put it in the
I mean, thank you so much for indulging us tonight and indulging the people watching.
Oh, my pleasure.
We love talking about this stuff. We are some of your biggest fans out there, and we spread the word of these Warner Brothers and Hanna Barbera shows everywhere.
It's an honor to meet you guys. I really enjoyed it. And, you know, if you want to do a Freakazoid show sometime, I'll get Rug to join in.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
That would be phenomenal. He was actually on our list of people to also reach out to as well.
Yeah, you should do that because he's awesome. And but anyway, anytime I'd love to talk more with you guys.
All right, thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.
Okay, we're gonna let you go. All right, bye. Thank you again.
Thank you again. All right, cool. And guys, so once again, thanks to our special guest tonight, Tom Ruegger. I hope everybody had a great time with that, and definitely we will have Tom back to do this again. Tune in Thursday night with Ryan, Vinny, and Grassia and myself for our next IncrediChat, and the topic is.
Actually, I don't think we have an official topipic yet. Oh. Yeah, we're talking. Well, we're going to be talking about maybe a movie or something. At least next week, we're definitely going to have something.
I know. I heard rumblings of Last Jedi.
Yes, so. Possibly next week, because we want to give our audience time to watch it so they could be up to date with it. All right, so we'll figure out what we're talking about Thursday.
Cool, yeah, and definitely go check out Tom's blog. Follow him up on Twitter and Facebook as well. And yeah, it was a great show tonight. So thank you all again for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next IncrediChat. Thank you.
All right, have a great time, guys. Bye.